I'm calling to order the Board of Trustees meeting for February 16th, 2021. It is being recorded, so everyone on this Zoom knows. The meeting is being held electronically pursuant to the Illinois Open Meetings Act and the declaration of disaster and emergency with the COVID pandemic. May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Chamberlain.
Here.
Trustee Clayton.
Here.
Trustee Goldstein. Trustee Haber.
Here.
Trustee Hollander.
Here.
Trustee Jamerson.
Oh, I guess we are ahead of Rick. So, okay. Moving forward, first item of business is approval of minutes from the Board of Trustees meeting for February 2nd, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any additions or corrections? Hearing none, roll call for approval of minutes for the Board of Trustees meeting for February 2nd, 2021.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein.
Aye.
Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Still
Thank you.
missing. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Village ecologist is not here this evening. Treasurer's report. We have a number of items that are included in this evening's packet. Trustee Clayton, do you wish to give a report?
Just a few comments. On the summary of revenues and expenses, I inadvertently set out the detailed report rather than the summary, and I sent out the summary a few minutes before the meeting, so it'll be a little easier to look at. But the bottom line for the end of January in the general fund was that we were positive about $68,000. The reason for the fact that we had a surplus was that there was a $150,000 CARES grant booked in January. Absent, that's a one-time event. Absent the CARES grant, the results for the month were a deficit of about 31.5. That compares to a budgeted deficit of 83,000 and a deficit of 24,757 last year. So we're only slightly more negative than the pre-pandemic results for January, I'm sorry. With regard to cash, we lost $170,666 from December to January. Of note, however, the water fund has about 2.5 million in it, and the sewer fund has about 1.6 million in it, which is well above our target balances. But when we look at the capital plan going forward to 2024, there's some major work in both areas. And by 2024, the water fund is projected to be down to 673,000, and the sewer fund actually a deficit of 401,000. So we're going to use up the both the excess over our target balance and a lot of the target balance per se. So we're either going to have to address rates, or the general fund is going to have to support those funds until they rejuvenate based on the work projections I have from Pat. So if there's any questions, let me know.
I have a question.
Yes, Mike.
On page 35 of 56, which is the sewer fund. And this says it's for the fiscal period of January 21 to January 31st. So it's 1 month, right? I can't hear you, Michael, you're muted.
Yes, it should be 1 month.
So there's $102,000 in maintenance supplies. What the heck is that? Do we know?
I don't, I'm going to need some help on that.
I mean, that's like a huge number, right?
Yeah, I'll look into that, Mike, and get back to you. I'll get back to the board.
Pat, you were here earlier, but I'm not seeing you right now.
He's there. I see him.
I'm still here. I don't know unless that's a reflection of the the payment to Lake County for the Timbers lift station, but I thought that
Yes.
was 2 meetings ago.
But 2 meetings ago would still be showing, I think, in this
Oh, true,
report,
right.
because this is January. So that's what it's for.
Well, if we could just get that verified, because otherwise it
We'll
just,
double check, Mike, but I'm pretty sure that that is for the Timbers.
it just was, it just kind of struck me that was a big number for 1 month, so.
Right. But it was for a large project that we paid all at once, but we'll double check. I should
Right.
note too oh, Henry, go ahead.
Yeah, this may not come up until next year, but if we're looking into a deficit in either the water or the sewer fund, using the general fund to offset that, is the general fund split evenly among all residents while the water and sewer fund is more of a user pay?
Yes.
Can we use general funds then in that situation?
Well, yes, you can always use general funds for anything. It's not something we would want to do, but it would not be illegal. Let me put
Right,
it that
and
way.
that's why we had decided to have a reserve in both of those funds because we didn't want to have to resort to using general funds.
And we have a meeting scheduled in the near future to talk about
Wednesday.
the fund or the charges for both sewer and water to see what's appropriate given our projections moving forward, because obviously that is what we need to be careful about.
I could,
Second, I should also note for the record that when Trustee Clayton was talking about the deficits in January, normally we don't have, we run expenses for things such as the police before we collect a lot of money for the police, and that comes out later. So we make big catch up later. So it was expected that we would be drawing on money in the bank, but it doesn't mean we would be at that deficit the whole time. So, yes,
I-
Bruce?
I just wanted to go back to the subject of the reserves. I had a discussion with our finance consultant the other day. When we set those buffers, those reserves, the theory of it also was that if we saw looking forward 5 years that there was going to be an extraordinary expense, that we would adjust the rates. So we anticipated that while we wanted to have the buffers, it was supposed to be a dynamic adjustment. We would look at what's going on. And so when Pat's firm provides these annually, these updates to a 5-year look forward, and we see that we have some major issues ahead, then it shouldn't be a surprise that we have to think of what we have to do to reestablish that buffer. That was really part of the original conception. And I guess, Mike Clayton, that's what you're talking about as well. Tom?
We have the funds, but we don't necessarily have to transfer it, but that's the point, that we want to make sure we have it to be able to make these repairs and not necessarily borrow money, et cetera.
So are we anticipating changing the charge for the sewer and or water before 2024 comes up? Or are you waiting for 2024 then to deal with this?
No, we have a
No,
meeting Wednesday. to
Yeah,
talk.
I would imagine that we would make that recommendation for this year. Frankly, it's probably something that if there needs to be one, I'll try to recommend it before May for obvious reasons. Because I think it's something I have to stand behind, but that basically is where we're sitting. So any other questions as far as that report?
I did confirm that $102,000 charge was at the January 19th meeting. That is the payment for the Timbers lift station work to Lake County Public Works.
Okay, great. So, good, always good to double check. We don't want to be Dixon. So, okay then. Hey, other than the fact I'd love to suddenly find there was 56 million out there that we weren't expecting. Yes, Mr. Haber.
Just because we continue to talk about this concept of, can the general fund, contribute to the sewer fund or contribute to the water fund when not everyone benefits from the sewer and the water fund. I think as part of that process, if we're going to go down that road, we also may want to start thinking about the potential of splitting the North Sewer Fund and the South Sewer Fund, because those sewers are significantly different. And we may want to actually split those, because I'm not sure that one is not subsidizing the other. If we're going to go down that road and really try and, and make sure that there's no one subsidizing anybody else in this village, that's something that I think we should be looking at, because the grinder pump sewer system, I believe, based upon my discussions with Patrick, when we've kind of gone through these numbers, is significantly greater than the cost of the maintenance of the North Riverwood sewer system.
Oh, without question, Mike, you're correct. But part of that was we selected the grinder pumps. We told the people this is what they had, and we have something that has greater maintenance. Second, we are all benefiting from everybody in Riverwoods who is on sewer. So while, yes, some people may have more expensive than others, I think it still is a general public benefit. But that's a policy decision that we can discuss, obviously. I think I just am on the other side of it. And I've got one of those real cheap sewers living where I am in Thorngate with it engineered. I'm just willing to do it because I think it's in my interest as well. So, but it is a policy decision, Mike.
Just so you know, I'm not saying that I'm not willing to do it also. I'm just
No.
saying, to the extent that we're going to start going down that road, we've talked about it with the roads, we've talked about it in a bunch of other things. I've made the comment in the past that I think that the roads benefit everyone in the village as well, but other people have made a contrary.
Understood, Mike. Let's not get too far down the road on that. Second, these are funds that are limited in scope as to what they can and can't be used for, so we have to treat them separately. But the other topic is not on the agenda, and I don't think we need to visit that this evening. And
I'm not
I
trying to
understand.
do that. I'm not
I'm saying, understand, you're just voicing a general opinion, but we're moving forward now. Are there any other questions? Okay, then moving on to engineers report.
I did get a quote from the census vendor for the automated meter read upgrade. I have a meeting set to review that quote with them Thursday of this week. So I will, once more, I'll take a chance. Say I expect to bring a recommendation to the board at the next meeting. I'm back on record with that bold prediction.
So if not, he's buying dinner. What else have you got this evening, Patrick?
That's all.
Okay, any questions for the engineer? All right, then, Director of Community Services report.
Okay, I think I'll start off with the biggie, which is the snow and snow removal and snow plowing. We've got a lot of invoices and we're spending a lot of money. The last 24 hours, we're gonna get hit with a lot of money for the snow removal, salting. I had the owner of the company talk to me this morning, and John, I talked with him. The cul-de-sacs, dead end streets, we are piled with snow. There's no place else to put it. Hopefully it slows down tomorrow and Friday. He's going to get a front end loader out there and try to start carting some of the snow away and make some space, because I guess there's a big forecast for another 6, 8, 10 inches of snow next week. We're just running out of places to put it at this point in time. So there's going to be another expense there to take care of that. So I just want to make everybody aware. And he's been pretty fair with us so far. I know he took away, I think it was 5 or 6 truckloads a weekend ago and cleaned up some spaces. So his guys have been working. I know he went. I was out driving around the village this morning, late morning, and I was talking to him. We had a couple of complaints about some mailboxes, and he took care of 2 of them. And he said he was going home because he'd been up for about 3 hours. So they put in their time. So just to let everybody know, the snow removal is. When the 2010, 2011, when I was still there, that was the season that we took a big hit also for this type of weather. The last thing, or the next thing is we had, you want to talk about the property on Milwaukee now, or you want to bring that up later?
We can bring it up now if you want.
Okay.
It's on for information later, either way.
Yeah, the mayor, chief, one of the officers, myself, we met with a group of people who are looking at the property, the indoor property on Milwaukee. They're looking to put a gun range and a gun club, a store with some parking on that. They got a very well-documented plan here and everything else, but the problem is that we're not so sure with their rough sketches and what they want to do that it's going to fit on this property. And Pat knows that I know it. That's always been the problem. We've had a lot of people looking at that piece of property, but never seem to be able to go ahead and work the structure and the parking and everything in there, so it's a viable product. So at this point, they're going back and get themselves an engineer and see how they can lay this out and make it work.
Those who aren't familiar, the Ingdahl property is the property immediately south of Aptekissick Creek, next to the storage facility on Milwaukee, not CubeSmart, but the one that's been there for 25 years. It's about 7.5 acres, but Pat tells me that only about an acre of that is actually buildable because the rest of it is flood, etc. So
Yeah, I would maybe make the clarification. It is the parcel with Aptekissick Creek. It's not south.
Yeah,
Is
So-
that north or south of Deerfield?
it's south of the 37 acres.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so everybody looks at the acreage when they see the for sale sign and listing. What they don't see is how much of it really can't be used. So
right.
again,
I think we should say-
obviously there may be some questions, but I think their engineering is going to be the biggest hurdle here. Bruce, you want to?
Yeah, it can't be used without substantial engineering.
True.
Now, we made that very clear. We said that it was a nice presentation, but now they had to go take that extra step and hire somebody and do their homework and the due diligence to make sure that what their plans are going to fit on that piece of property, because it's going to be close. So
Okay, what else
that's
you
just
got?
for
Russ?
information at this point in time. We'll see when they come back. I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that that was one iron in the fire. So we'll see where it goes from here. And the last thing is that I had a red tag there at Mr. Scores, and finally I wasn't getting any response. I had his attorney call me last Thursday or Friday. We had a long conversation, so she's going to go back and talk with him. I told her that the fence was, illegal. It either had to come down or all the plastic had to come off. And he's got a good frame there. I went and looked at it. He could go back and build a 2-coat fence with wood, and he could build a stockade fence or a board-on-board fence, but he could make that fence become code compliant. But what he has there now is not compliant, and so she was going to go back and talk with him, and so I'm waiting for them to get back to me now. We'll see where we go from there.
Okay, any questions for Russ? The Zoning Board of Appeals has not met. Plan Commission,
I have 3 items to report. At the February 4th meeting, the Plan Commission reviewed TIF guidelines, which we either have sent to the board or will send to the board for them to take a look at. Secondly, the Plan Commission discussed the affordable housing requirements affecting Riverwoods. And we thought the idea of working with a developer through a nonprofit housing organization might be a good approach for Riverwoods if a multifamily development is proposed. So we'd like to obtain advice from such organizations if such a development pops up in the future. And then thirdly, on February the 11th, the Plan Commission published a notice of public hearing for March 4th to consider a zoning text amendment to amend the Riverwood zoning ordinance to revise and add defined terms for dwelling, dwelling unit, dwelling single family, family relationship, community residence, and transitional residence. One purpose of the proposed amendments is to update the definition of family and substitute the concept of a household. And the proposed text amendment also proposes adding a community residence as a permitted use in residential districts and a transitional facility as a special use in residential districts. That's it.
Any questions for the Plan Commission? All right, hearing none. Police report?
Only have the activity that is in your packets.
Okay, any questions for the chief? Hearing none. Village attorney?
We've been working on the appropriation ordinance. I see Kyle has joined us from Lauterbach Amons. So we will have a draft of the appropriation ordinance for the board in a short while, and we'll schedule the hearing that we have to have before we pass the appropriations ordinance on March 16th, the second meeting in March. After the hearing at the same meeting, we'll then adopt the appropriation ordinance. We have to before the end of the first fiscal quarter. The appropriation ordinance mostly follows the budget. Most of the line items we increase by 15%. So there's not a lot of mystery for most of the items, but the mystery is what to do with how we handle some of the unknowns and the contingencies. This is where we've tried to be a little proactive in the past. We've got this category called transfers out, which is really authority for the general fund to put money into one of the other funds because there's something we would like to do. So a dramatic example is that I suggested putting a large transfer out as an authority to spend, not as something we will do, but just having the authority to move money from the general fund to the TIF fund that includes the federal life and the colonial court property. That would give us the ability to make a large expenditure from the TIF fund. We'd make a loan from the general fund to the TIF fund, and then the TIF fund could make a large expenditure such as for property assemblage or acquisition. So when we get this to you, I'll try and highlight some of these guesses as to what we're trying to anticipate or give ourselves a little room to be able to accomplish. There's no science to it. It's all sort of an art, and it's also policy decisions, what you want to be able, have the freedom to be able to consider doing in the next year, remembering that the appropriation ordinance is basically your authority to enter into all these transactions. Other than that, I don't think you'll find anything very surprising in the ordinance. The other items I just wanted to update the board. I get conversations here from people who are looking at the 37 acres. Another conversation this week from someone else who'd been contacted by someone else who's looking at the property. So the limited distribution center idea, I talked to them. They told me that they are, going forward and negotiating and very close to a final deal. There's no deal, of course, until there's a deal. So I don't want to say too much other than to tell you that, I see that there's still conversation going on about the site, but with no particular person yet, announced as the winner. Let me put it that way. The same thing really with the federal life parcel. While I was told that they were under contract, the last conversation I had was, well, there was still a price discussion. So I think that's a normal give and take of negotiation. So in neither situation do we have something currently pending that is, a hard and fast contract that I'm aware of. And it probably would be, there will probably be a lag before we're totally aware of what's going on. And that's really, I did have, maybe I should, John, I don't know if you want me to mention the other inquiry I had about the Untermeyer property.
I think you might as well, if we thought it was a legitimate inquiry.
Well, I did. So the Untermeyer property is the 10-acre property on Saunders. It's At one point, a group that had control of the property had discussed putting a synagogue there. There were plans, met with the village. That concept was never realized. I think they didn't have the money for it eventually, or for whatever reason. And I'm not sure if the property is actually listed or not, but we've had several calls and inquiries about the property. A good portion of it is in very high quality wetlands from what I remember. If you were developing the property under the zoning that's there by right, it would be probably able to have 3 houses, 2-acre lots, 3 2-acre lots. Not many people are looking at that 10-acre parcel expecting only to get 3 houses. So people look at it hoping to get something else. So surprisingly, I got a call the other day from someone saying that what would the village think about a garden center on the property? That this particular party was aware of the fact that a lot of the site was in an area of wetlands, but that they thought that a garden center with some kind of nursery with plants and things like that would be a fitting kind of use of the site. I went and checked today. I didn't really know, couldn't remember. None of the single family restrictions that are private covenants that apply to all of the properties around Ravinia Green were imposed on this parcel. It always stood outside of all of what was going on around it. It was never part of the plats of subdivision of Country Club Estates. So the only restriction on it is the fact that it's classified in the R2 zoning district, I think, from a long time back. It's on the west side of Saunders Road. It, butts the country club. So, the board, I'm not polling you. You don't have to take a decision or make a decision. But the question really was, would the village ever even consider something like this? And I said, I had no idea. It's not the current zoning, and the area is residential. But, it's operationally, from what you would do on that kind of site, is it different from what operationally occurs on a golf course? There's 2 golf courses, one on either side of the road. Not for me to say, but I just thought I would make you aware of it. There's really no need to, we don't know if this would even go anywhere, but I just wanted to let you know that I had been contacted about this.
And given the fact that right now our finances are not as good as they've been through various reasons, we thought we should let you know this is not at all a recommendation on my part or council's necessarily to say the zoning should change. Not by any means, because I think would be a significant change at that location. But we thought you should know that that's something that may be out there, and you have to be aware. I did receive an email today as well that Ravinia Green wants to put in pickleball courts. And their question was, did they need to get a building permit? Well, of course, that would be required. And then we'll have to see where they want to put them and exactly what's required. I know that pickleball courts in some places have raised questions because of the degree of noise and lights at night. So I think we should be aware that it probably won't be as simple as we might imagine at first blush. So recognize that that is coming up as well. Anything else, council? Any questions from the board for council? Okay, then, moving on to my comments. Russ has already covered 2 of them, the snow removal, that we were going to be working on the corners. And obviously, for those of us who've been around a while, remember when we had an awful lot of accidents because of snow and people not being able to see around it. So we're going to worry about that. I think that's required. The shooting range you heard about. Finally, we've received an appeal, or excuse me, a notice of protest from Commonwealth Edison appealing the tax of approximately $6,000 that we had identified by our tax auditors. We passed this on to the council that's been handling all of these. As you might imagine, Commonwealth Edison has a host of these types of cases out there, and they're trying to get them consolidated, et cetera. So $6,000, but you might as well know. And I think it's worth noting that our tax auditors have found some money for us, not nearly as much as we'd like, obviously, but they still found some cash. Chief, are there any visitors wishing no emails? All right. Approval, Cheryl? You got,
Yeah,
here you
There we
go.
go. So mine somewhat relates to the bills because this came up when I was signing off on bills. But this is not a lot of money. This is about 225 to 250 100 a year. But we have this fund where it's labeled as senior transportation. What it was really intended for, my understanding is that this was originally Bill Spadek's idea, and it was really intended for seniors to maybe take a taxi to get medical care, and to, for people who were on a fixed income, and this would be really helpful. We really only have 2 people using this fund, and that is not what they're using it for. They're using it basically just for taxis to the train. So I wondered what other people thought about, should we continue this, just get rid of it because people aren't using it? Or do we want to make sure that it's really being used for its intended purpose, being getting seniors and perhaps even low income seniors transportation for medical care?
Well, no problem. I don't know if it was Bill Spadek or who it was. I think, Mike, it predated you even coming back on the board, didn't it? It's been there a long time, and I think that was the idea, that it was low income seniors.
I remember it too, but I don't think it had any specifics as to medical care. I don't recall that. I think it was just low income
Right.
seniors having access to taxi service at a reduced rate. And I think actually the township, Vernon Township, may provide a similar service, because just kind of anecdotally, I know that my mother-in-law, since passed away, used to go to Lincolnshire and get like senior citizen coupons for taxi cab services at a reduced rate.
Right. That's relatively common with townships. So we have not been in any way inquiring as to the low income portion of that. And I suspect, I do not know, that those who are utilizing it are not necessarily low income.
Cheryl,
If we wanted to do that, we could certainly do it by the same way we do it with the gas tax.
Cheryl,
rebate.
that was, you raised a question that I raised, I think, 14 years ago. And I was informed then that the cost of checking on it was too high. Because
No, actually, all we would have to do is, the checking is already done for us. So
Oh, I
those who would
understand.
apply for the gas tax rebate would be the same people.
I guess I'm just saying that the argument then was it was so small, nobody wanted to check. I frankly agree with you, because I don't know that I need to be subsidized. And I don't think it's appropriate for others to be.
Exactly, and particularly because we do have so many seniors, I'd really like for us to either just do away with it altogether, or let's at least enforce the low income availability
Well,
part.
if the board wants to do that, A, we can't do it tonight, but B,
not-
I
I'd be
understand.
perfectly willing to. Yes, Mike?
I was going to say, this isn't on the agenda.
No.
It isn't, I just wondered what people's thoughts were.
So it's,
And if people were inclined to make a change, I would like to see it on the
okay,
agenda.
at risk of not going anywhere, and I've already told you where I am, let me know and we'll put it on the agenda to change that.
Okay,
But as noted, it's not there. And
Yes,
some of us
thank
don't
you.
get to do this from home. Some of us have to come to the village hall.
thank you.
So, all right then, do I have a motion for approval of bills?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? Got to pay them. Somebody better say yes.
I second.
Oh, okay, didn't hear it. Thank you. Any questions? If not, may I then have a roll call for the approval of bills for the February 16th, 2021 meeting.
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Goldstein,
Aye.
trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jamerson.
I'm a little worried about Rick because I saw him this morning and he said he was going to be here this evening. I'll have to check on him. Okay, thank you very much for the approval of bills. Moving on to action items. The signage question for the State Farm Agency in Colonial Court. Since I wrote the memo, I believe that Russ has had some conversation with the gentleman. I provided you with a copy of his email. At this particular moment, obviously, I don't think we can require him to necessarily move it. I don't think it's necessarily even that visible, given how much snow may be piled around it. But you've seen that he's requested relief from our ordinance. And with that, I think I see him up here in the corner.
How's it going?
I can tell a State Farm chart from all the advertisements and probably can't get the Rogers rate
Yeah.
at this point. So at least we do pay some attention. So I'll turn it over to you at this point, because obviously you're the one asking for relief. Tell us what you want and what you think maybe we can do.
Yeah, I mean, this year, obviously, everybody knew 2020 was a kick in the butt and lost a lot of income from whether it be people not driving so much, not driving cars, just rate reductions, and the general competition of online price wars with Geico and Progressive. So coming up with an edge to get any new customers that I can, you know, this I don't know if everybody's seen this red cargo trailer. It has, you know, State Farm and my name, my cell phone, my email, and on the back of it that faces Deerfield Parkway currently where it's parked, you know, it says, you know, ask Andy if you need to borrow this trailer for free or if you want to. And I've had it, I don't know, since last May. And people over the summer, probably on a weekly basis, called us up, whether they were a customer or not, asked us to borrow the trailer for whatever items that they were moving. And I let them use it. So they'd come and I give them the keys and help them hook it up to their truck. And while they were there, I'd ask them if I could quote their insurance. And sometimes we switched them, sometimes it didn't, but it was just another way of gaining customers. And, you know, I just, you know, a silly red trailer might seem, you know, small and, you know, not significant to many, but it does actually have a large impact on my business and gaining new customers. So, you know, right now it's parked, like I said, on Deerfield Parkway. I was just became aware of this new sign law when Russ walked in my office about 2 weeks ago and let me know that I was out of the code. So, you know, obviously it's not my authority to question why the code is there or anything like that. But, you know, I didn't know if moving it back away from Deerfield Parkway, right up against a parking spot where my doors are, would be a better solution or what. Obviously it's kind of like a sign that's closer to the street, because there is no real sign that I have that says State Farm on it on that side where the only entrance is, or the main entrance is, to the parking lot. So.
Well, one, let me say that this isn't a new ordinance. This has been there, and it was just that we noted that the trailer had been there for some time and decided that the ordinance did apply and that we needed to let you know that you had a problem.
Yeah.
As to simply moving it, I'm not sure that that would necessarily cure all of the problems within the ordinance. We certainly understand your concerns. As it sits right now, I'm not sure there's even that much in the way of additional signage that we could allow. We would have to take some action. That doesn't mean we can't. But I think that's a policy decision and a legal decision that has to come up from the board. Henry?
Yeah, I put some thought into this, and although we can't help you with your competitors if Geico wants to undercut your charges, but we have made attempts at least 2 or 3 different areas to help people through the COVID restrictions and decrease in income. And one of the things I was thinking of was allowing the sign to be there, the truck trailer, until the COVID restrictions were lifted, when you would at least be back in the same situation you were before, and you'll have to deal, as I say, with your business income, at least on an equitable basis. But this is your business's problem is the signage. We have certainly given funding to the hotels. We have reduced fees to the commercial district around you. And I think this is something that we can do. Outside dining, we've relaxed some of the restrictions. I, for one, would be supportive of allowing that to remain, but only until the COVID restrictions were gone. And at that point, you would have to come into compliance.
Cheryl?
So it's interesting that Henry said that, because that's exactly what I was going to say. I do think we should put a definite, a date certain. Obviously, we don't really know exactly how long the severity of the pandemic is going to last, but I think we know for sure, at least through June. So perhaps we can basically give him COVID relief until that point, and then reevaluate at that time.
Mr. Clayton?
I'd like some clarification on what qualifies as a sign myself. This is if he had a truck parked in front of a delivery van parked in front of the flower shop that had the name of the flower shop on the side, would that qualify as a sign? In this case, to me, it sounds to me more like it's less of a sign and more of a process, a part of his doing business. And so it's a function of the way he goes about doing his business. And so I need some clarification myself on whether this is what constitutes a sign.
We looked at the sign ordinance, and this is a sign on, it's a mobile sign, it's a sign on wheels, it's movable, and those are prohibited. I think the definition in the sign ordinance pretty clearly encompasses this. And the question I would ask the board to consider is it's okay to waive the application of the sign ordinance if you want, but it's not okay to waive it selectively. So the question is, are you going to say that the sign ordinance doesn't prevent any user at Colonial Court or shops from having a similar device? And if you're going to say that any sort of similar device is okay during the period of COVID, that's fine, but it's not, you don't want to have a situation where you apply the sign ordinance, you know, for one business differently than you apply it for others. So
Bruce, we did relax some of the signage as in the small fiberboard or whatever type of signs talking about what they were doing.
Well, I think,
However,
but don't we relax them generally for everything that was similarly situated is what I'm trying to say.
There was no distinction between the various groups.
Right.
Anybody could have been putting out signage like that. So
right.
You're saying that we'd have, if everybody wanted a trailer, we'd have to let them all be out there during COVID if we let Andy do it.
Well, I mean, I would advise the board to be consistent. And
well,
so
we do. We can't just pick and choose. That would be inappropriate. Mike, you still have another comment question?
Yeah, Bruce, I don't think that really answered my question. I think that it's not a trailer per se. It's a element. If this was a rental truck that was parked in front of CubeSmart with the name CubeSmart on the side, would that qualify as a sign? What I'm saying, this is an elemental part of his business function. It's not per se a sign.
I think when I looked at the definition, I'm just going to pull it up because I think the definition was clear enough that it was in this case. And let me just get it up for you.
Second, I'd point out that his business is selling insurance. And while this is a means of trying to get insurance, it's not a fundamental part of a truck.
I don't think it's up to us to define what his business is. I think his business is, if he's giving free trailer usage as an element of doing business, then I think it's part of the element of business rather than a sign.
Then Mike, any advertising would fit into that category because Andy was honest enough to admit that's why he was doing it.
I disagree. And it's not any advertising. It's not advertising on the side of the wall. It's not a sign over the shop. It is he's giving the trailer to people for use that he uses as a method of drawing in customers.
Yeah.
That to me is a lot different than a sign over the shop.
We do, so, first of all, we prohibit off-premises signs. We prohibit people from having signs apart from their premises. Otherwise, we could have signs on distant corners that could fulfill the same purpose that you were just describing. The sign ordinance refers to, and that's a very classical type of prohibition, off-premises signs. Portable or wheeled signs are prohibited, except in the automobile service station zoning district. Off-premises signs are prohibited. So, it's okay to want to assist a business, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't assist this business owner. I'm just saying that if other businesses in shops or colonial court wanted to have the same thing, really, I don't think would be appropriate for us to try and judge whether this is an integral part of selling insurance to have this kind of device. I think we'd have to say this is a sign, and we're going to let other businesses in those shopping centers have the same kind of sign. I mean, that would be my advice to the board on this.
Yes. Mr. Trustee Haber, you were wanting to make a comment or had a question?
Yeah, I was going to say that, well, Michael Clayton, I think you're right that it's an element of his business. We still have the right to make rules and regulations with respect to what's going to be in that retail shopping center. So I think that, and I actually commend Andy for what he's done. I think it was very ingenious of him to try and capture new customers that way. When I read his email, I was like, wow, this guy is really thinking outside the box, really a great idea, provides a great service for his customers or for potential customers. I thought it was brilliant. Nonetheless, it's a current violation of our ordinance. And I'd like to see him be able to keep the sign certainly through this pandemic period, if we can relax the sign ordinance. And then I think we can address whether or not, there should be a change to the sign ordinance. But, at this point, I think to address his immediate concern, I think we should just agree to relax the ordinance during this period of the pandemic.
I think that sounds like a very wise. Again, with my emergency powers, I don't think this directly applies, so I need the board to approve this action, but I think that's very reasonable, and I have no problem revisiting the sign ordinance. That's something we get to do every few years anyway.
What if I bring it back up, say around the middle of June, end of June, we'll sit down as a board, the board can sit down and decide if the pandemic is still going to affect this. And then in the meantime, everybody think about if you want to make changes to the sign ordinance, how to word them. And if not, then, we'll move forward from there and think of something else.
Well, we certainly can make it.
Months to think about it.
As Trustee Chamberlain said, we should have a sunset provision if in fact this pandemic does continue, which all of us hope it does not. He can always come back and we can always extend it, but at least that way we know there is some deadline and it's not going on forever. So is there a motion to that effect? Henry, do I see your hand up there?
Yeah, I certainly think that we can extend it until June 15th, unless the COVID restrictions are removed, whatever the earlier date would be then.
Can I suggest the second board meeting in June, whatever that is?
Anybody got a calendar real handy?
Hold on.
The 15th. Should have known Henry would have the right date. So, okay, does that?
Oh, it is the 15th, yeah.
Yeah, see, Henry's wise. We should all know that. So in any event, then, is someone going to propose a motion to relax the sign ordinance in this particular instance?
Thought I did.
Well,
I'll second it.
Down for sure, and I want to make sure. Okay, the board, the chair. Oh, yes, Mike.
Me, Mike?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Clayton.
I think to qualify the extension based on a notion of relaxing the COVID restrictions is unduly vague. I don't know exactly what that means. Does it mean we're at level 5 or 4 or what does it mean? I'd rather have just a firm date, June 15th, and then we can revisit the matter.
Well, how about it, we could amend that to say unless the governor raises his emergency orders.
So
Would that be?
Henry, you may have had a different intention, but I was thinking that we relax it because of COVID restrictions, but then through June 15, but then we reevaluate because I don't know that any of us are going to be able to
We can always-
quantify or until that point.
But if, you know, let us all hope that some miracle happens and they all went away sooner and the governor said, great, we're in condition 5, everybody go back to normal life. That would again, though, be a specific item. And I think Mr. Clayton's idea was that it was a little vague to say restrictions. lifted. Mr.
That
Haber?
was the earlier of the two.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the likelihood is that even when the restrictions are lifted, things are not going to go back to normal
Okay.
overnight. And so I think if we pick a date and just come back and revisit the date, you know, revisit the issue on that date, maybe extend it, maybe terminate it, that's going to probably be the most sensible as opposed to tying it into some other regulation.
The reality is I doubt if we'll all be gone anyway by then, but
Right.
Henry, it's your motion. Do you want to leave your motion with the?
Well, I think if we're using the reasoning for permitting the exception is the COVID restrictions, that if the COVID restrictions go away, you have to remove the exception. So if the reality is it's unlikely to occur before June 15th, I think the point is moot. But no, I don't want to change the motion, but certainly it may not pass.
Right. And is it, when it was seconded with the understanding that we were talking about then going into phase 5? Cheryl is nodding her
Yes.
head, yes. Okay.
Yes.
So
Could we have a discussion though, further discussion?
Yes, I was just going to say further discussion.
Henry, would you consider the fact that, as I indicated, that it's not likely to change overnight? So even if the restrictions ended today, there certainly is a likelihood that business could be bad, you know, for these people until June regardless. So I think we could still tie it to the COVID-19 restrictions or the pandemic itself and say because of that and because of the effect it's had on business, that June 15th is a reasonable date.
Or let's say within 30 days of the restrictions being lifted, which will then give you the ability to give them a month, because you're correct, it won't just overnight change. You can give them a 30-day grace period.
Well, Henry, it's your motion. Do you want to amend it to that?
I think that's reasonable. It's within
Cheryl?
either June, we'll rediscuss it again in June 15th or within 30 days after the restrictions are lifted.
Cheryl, do you
fine.
accept that amendment? You do.
I
Then-
will.
Okay, the motion before the board then is to stay enforcement of the advertising or sign ordinance in relation to this type of advertising through June 15th or 30 days after we enter phase 5 and restrictions for COVID are lifted. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
trustee Clayton,
No,
trustee Goldstein. Trustee Goldstein, could you repeat that?
Yeah, aye.
Thank you. Trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
and trustee Jamerson. Okay, thank you.
Did you get trustee Chamberlain?
Yes,
Okay. So that is a 4-1
Passed.
and the motion passes. So
correct.
you've got a little relief on it and we'll work on what maybe can be there. And I think we all do agree your ingenuity and entrepreneurship. Now we just have to find it where it's acceptable to our sign standards in some way. All right, then, moving on to the next item of business, presentation and possible, hopefully, acceptance of the 2019 audit. I believe you all got copies of that. I know trustee Chamberlain did not receive it the first time, so I hope the rest of you did.
I didn't get it.
You
because
didn't, Mike, okay. because I know I specifically remembered after missing last time to put it. So that's 2 of you then. I'll try to ship you a copy on the side so that you can have it. We have with us tonight Carl Thomas from Miller Cooper to tell us in general about the audit. I don't think we had any problems, but Carl, let you tell the board what your findings were.
Good. Thank you for having me, everybody. Again, as Mayor Norris said, I'm Carl Thomas, and I'm the manager on the Villages engagement. So Betsy above me is the partner. I think many of you know Betsy from just various meetings and such. So anyways, without further ado, I'd like to just review, as Mayor Norris said, kind of in high level, some of our results and some of the key parts of the deliverables. So I promise I won't put you to sleep. I know it's getting a little late. Anyways, so with that being said, the first thing I like to talk about is the financial statement document. So that one, I'm not sure what it's titled on your end, but it's 148 pages on the PDF, so to speak. So, you know, the front page is, it says Village of Riverwoods, Illinois, Annual Financial Report. That's the one I'm talking off of now, okay? Now, the first thing I always like to highlight, of course, is the auditor's opinion. That's sort of, you know, why we do this. You know, we perform the engagement, perform various tests, analyses and such, and we look to render an opinion on whether we feel that the financial statements are a fair representation of the village's position and also results, okay? And so I'm on page, it's 4 of the PDF. It's page 1 through 3, okay? So 4 to 6 on the PDF, 1 through 3 on the paper, so to speak. And this is the opinion. And so on page 5 of the PDF, so the 4 of the paper, I believe, or 2 of the paper, I believe, the second paragraph, opinion, you know, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we call an unmodified opinion. So that's a good opinion, in other words, a good opinion. It means that there are no material errors or omitted disclosures in these financial statements. Now, the key to remember, though, is that that opinion is relevant to the village's basis of accounting, which is the cash basis, as you know, for external reporting. So just be aware of that if you attempt to compare this report to your neighboring villages or things like that. So just remember that a lot of other villages, some other villages are on an accrual basis, whereas you're on a cash basis. So just keep that in mind. So again, our opinion is a clean, unmodified, quote unquote, good opinion insofar as the modified cash basis of accounting, which is an option to you under the state rules, okay? Any questions about the opinion? It's a good opinion, like I said. Okay. Now, just kind of highlighting a few of the more important pages in this report. Starting on page 13 of the paper is the village's what we call statement of net position. It's kind of like the balance sheet, sort of says, you know, here's the cash, the assets, etc. And this is the consolidated village look, okay? And the page after it is what we call the statement of activities. That's the income statement, okay? Page 14. So again, consolidated village look, everything as one village, okay? Starting on page 16 through 19 is the fund breakout. So there you can see the general fund. I know you were talking about that earlier on the treasurer's report. There it is. That's what the general fund did for 2019. So, and the fund statements go through page 19. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Moving on, I know we were talking about the water and sewer funds, which begin on page 21 through 24. So again, you have a statement of position, which shows the assets, the liabilities, and then after that, you have an income statement, essentially, showing the revenues less the expenditures, okay? And there's also a cash flow, since this is a business type fund. So you want to see, there it is right there. Thank you, Mayor Norris. You can see the money coming in, money going out, and how those changes flowed through to the bottom line in terms of the change in cash. So this is actually pretty important for these funds because unlike the governmental funds, which receive taxes, which is, I'm not going to say guaranteed, but it's more of a sure bet than something you're charging people for as a user fee. So cash flows are very important to these funds. So I encourage you to read this and understand it. And, you know, if you have questions, feel free to ask too. The other interesting schedules in your report, I would like to go down quite a bit to page 57. Now, 57 begins the pension schedules. So this one right here, changes in net pension liability and related ratios. This shows how basically well-funded your IMRF account is, which is your pension system at the village. So it's interesting stuff, you know. For 2018, the liability kind of midway through there, 3,883,319. Fiduciary net position kind of down halfway, 3.1 million. Yep, there you go. Now, net pension liability assets, 776,000. Now, what I want to clarify here is that these are actuarial developed numbers for accounting principles. Okay, so I don't want anyone to think that there's a bill coming for $776,514. I think that's important to understand. These are actuarial estimates developed within the guidelines of an accounting principle so that governmental entities are comparable across states, counties, villages, etc. Everything is comparable. So I want that to be understood. You know, this is a long-term view of the pension. Okay. And then on page 59 is a schedule of contributions over the years and a percentage of that contribution as a percentage of the village's covered payroll. And by covered payroll, we mean employees that receive a pension. Okay. Those are the highlights of the village's report from my standpoint. Again, you know, the financial report is those are the main schedules. And you know, any questions about this document at a high level or a low level? Okay. Yes.
Yes, Henry.
Yeah. Do you have a percentage that you assume the pension fund is going to increase by each year?
Those are also actuarial estimates, which the pension engages an actuary to figure those out. And there's a number of layers to it. There's a quote unquote service cost. So current employees, right? What did the current employees earn and what is that projected out to cost, et cetera. And then there's an early retirement layer. There's various layers that the actuaries calculate. So I personally don't know that answer. No.
Excuse me, that really wasn't my question.
I think, Henry, I think it's determined that in our contribution this year is somewhere around 10.7% of the total salary.
No, it's not my question. About 4 years ago, when we did this last that I remember, the assumption was that the pension growth, the funds that we had set aside for pension, the growth was something like 6% or 6.5%. And I questioned at that time that the market was able to give you 6 to 6.5% on pension funds. So my question this year is there an assumption on what the return is on the investment for pension funds?
Yes. Okay, now I understand your question. Thank you. You're asking about the assumption of what the market is going to return on the pensions investments, which is overall a contribution of the fund's health, correct? Right?
Yes. The reason was, as I remember last time, it was like 6.5%. And we knew we weren't going to get anywhere near there. And therefore, it indicated that our liability was much less than what it really would be in reality. And so this year I'm asking, what is the assumption of the pension fund earnings?
Yes. Mayor Norris, if you would like to share.
Well, I was going to say that comes from IRMF. And it's not something that Carl figures out. It's the actuaries from the retirement fund. And Bruce, if you want to jump in too, please feel free. But they calculate the number and they're audited separately as to the return. And I'm not sure what their assumption is this year.
I can actually answer that, Mayor.
7.5%.
Yeah, it's reduced to 7.25% in the last couple of years. IMRF is in a phase right now where they are attempting to decrease that assumed rate of return. But I think that what the issue is obviously every year that you do decrease that assumed rate of return, you do see an increase in the rate. And so IMRF has been sensitive to changing it too quickly, because they are aware that when it was 7.5%, they were only hitting that actuarial assumption about 35% of the time. And so if they get it down to 7%, they hit it about 70% of the time. And so that's really where IMRF's goal is, to get it down closer to 7%.
So just to make sure everybody knows, Kyle is our current representative from Lauterbach. He's acting as our CFO, so. And yes, Chris Ford.
So if this is not within our ability to determine or to act upon, then I'm going to stop, as far as I'm concerned, my inquiry. If this is beyond our ability to control it, then my question is really moot.
We just need to make sure we're paying our share, et cetera, and hopefully they're doing it right. Chris, this is more your bailiwick, I think.
Yeah, it's beyond our control.
That's
The
the
assumed
easy
rate of
answer.
return, yes. The assumed rate of return is based on a number of factors that the actuary uses, and they are based upon premiums above expected real returns of different asset classes, and all of that, inflation rate, et cetera. And no, it's not something that we have any input on.
And so we just need to make sure that we're funded at the correct rate so that we're not at a deficit and still can meet our liability, which obviously it shows we are.
They will send you a bill. They
Yep.
send you a bill for what your appropriate rate, your appropriate contribution is based on.
And they don't hesitate to adjust it if they find out something.
No, they do not.
I think
And that's why they're so very well funded, Henry.
I think that the what would be, for our perspective to keep in mind, is that if their assumptions are too rosy, Henry, and later they change it and our contribution rate goes up, we're not, as the village, we're not trying to make a catch-up contribution to solve the problem for the entire system. The change in the rate affects what we owe for the employees we've had. So with respect to our total, and Carl, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the total exposure to the village on an adjustment in rates for what we have to bear in the future is very small in relation to our overall assets. Carl, if that's a fair summary.
Correct. The village's account with IMRF is not like the school districts have with the teachers, which is, they're different. So IMRF is what they call an agent multiple employer. So it's similar to a single employer, but IMRF handles the administration, so to speak, okay? So it's just your money, just your employees, but you have help with the administration. So it's a shared actuary, et cetera. And Bruce is actually correct. So the school districts, everyone's in a giant pot. So you end up subsidizing other employers. So your account is not like that. That's very correct.
Or the state where they gave IOUs instead of actually paying money, et cetera. So
correct.
That's where we're in the problem. We have things that aren't funded, and we're funded only with promises, not real money. So Chris, you wanted to say something more?
I was just going to offer, Henry, if you want to have a side conversation sometime on that. I was the consultant to the IMRF for a time in my career, so I've got a little bit of insight there. So if you want to have a separate conversation, that's great.
Yeah, bring these questions up in 4 months, Henry.
So does anybody believe that a pension fund can guarantee back at 7.25%, 7.5% return today?
It's calculated over an extended period of time. And those are, this is a separate financial discussion.
And some of those things are like bonds that in this case, I don't know that would work, but sometimes you have bonds that go over longer periods with guaranteed rate returns, et cetera. So
they've got all of that.
Not an easy answer. Let me put it that way.
No, it is not.
So, all right. Does anyone else have any questions for Carl about the audit or our financial report? Okay, then I would like a motion to accept the audit.
So moved.
Is there a second? Someone, we can go home?
Second.
Okay, got to get the right incentive out there. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I have a roll call, please, on a motion to accept the 2019 audit.
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
Trustee Clayton,
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein,
Aye.
Trustee Haber,
Aye.
Trustee Hollander,
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson. Thank
Still
you.
absent. All right, then, we have no old business. I know of no reason to go into executive session. Is there anything for the basic good of the order? Hearing none, then everybody try to stay warm, try to stay out of the snow, and I'm headed down to see Mike and Eric as quick as I can tomorrow. I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Oh, roll call.
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
Trustee Clayton,
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein,
Aye.
Trustee Haber,
Aye.
Trustee Hollander,
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson. Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.